The first glance. The transport shuttle descended through Thessera's atmosphere, and Ryan Mercer pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below, crystalline spires pierced through clouds that shimmered with an otherworldly opalescence. He'd traveled to 17 different worlds in his 5 years with the Interstellar Relations Division, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Beautiful, isn't it?" His assigned guide, a young Thesseran named Kiv, said through the translation device. "The Crystal Hall awaits. High Counselor Silith will address the gathering shortly." Ryan nodded, trying to focus on his briefing materials. This summit was crucial. Earth needed Thessera's advanced energy technology, and his job was to build cultural bridges that would make such cooperation possible. He'd spent months preparing, learning customs, studying their philosophy of harmonic existence. But all his preparation evaporated the moment he entered the Crystal Hall. The structure defied Earth's physics, appearing to be carved from a single massive gemstone that refracted light into impossible colors. Hundreds of beings from a dozen civilizations filled the space, some humanoid, others decidedly not. Ryan took his designated position among the Earth delegation, his heart hammering with the significance of the moment. Then the hall fell silent. She entered from the eastern archway, and Ryan's breath caught in his throat. High Counselor Silith moved with a grace that seemed choreographed by the universe itself. Her skin held that distinctive Thesseran shimmer, like moonlight on water, and she wore flowing robes that shifted color with each step. But it was her eyes that held him captive, deep violet, ancient yet somehow vulnerable, scanning the crowd with practiced authority. Their gazes met across the distance. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but in that span, Ryan felt the ground shift beneath him. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and something flickered across her face. Surprise? Recognition? Then, to his utter astonishment, a faint flush of deeper silver spread across her cheeks, visible even from where he stood. Silith looked away quickly, ascending to the central platform. She began her welcoming address, her voice melodic and commanding, translated simultaneously into dozens of languages. But twice more during her speech, her eyes found his in the crowd, and each time, that same subtle color change betrayed her composure. Ryan tried to listen to her words, to focus on the diplomatic importance of her message, but his mind was elsewhere. He was vaguely aware of his colleague, Ambassador Chen, elbowing him gently, whispering something about paying attention. He nodded absently, unable to tear his gaze away. When Silith paused mid-sentence, just for a heartbeat, he saw her advisor lean in with concern. She shook her head slightly, that flush deepening, before continuing with renewed focus. But the moment of vulnerability had been real, and Ryan had witnessed it. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse into smaller diplomatic clusters, Ryan stood rooted to his spot. His hands were trembling slightly, his usually analytical mind racing with questions that had nothing to do with energy treaties or cultural exchange programs. "You all right?" Chen asked, studying him with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading people across species barriers. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Ryan managed, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Just overwhelmed by the architecture." Chen snorted. "Sure. The architecture. That's why you couldn't stop staring at the High Counselor." Before Ryan could formulate a denial, Kiv appeared at his elbow. "The High Counselor's office has requested a private cultural briefing session with you tomorrow evening. In the Palace Gardens. Is this acceptable?" Ryan's heart leaped. "Yes," he said, perhaps too quickly. "Absolutely acceptable." As the delegation filed out toward their quarters, Ryan glanced back one last time. High Counselor Silith stood on the platform, surrounded by advisors, but her eyes were searching the crowd. When they found his, she didn't look away this time. Neither did he. Forbidden meetings. The palace gardens exceeded anything Ryan had imagined. Bioluminescent flowers opened as he passed, releasing soft fragrances that seemed to respond to his emotions. Pathways of polished stone wound between trees whose leaves chimed softly in the evening breeze, creating a melody that felt almost sentient. Kiv had left him at the garden entrance with a knowing smile. "The High Counselor values privacy for these sessions," the young Thesseran had said, though something in his tone suggested he understood this was more than a simple briefing. Ryan found her beside a pond that reflected the 3 moons rising in Thessera's twilight sky. She stood with her back to him, her robes flowing like liquid starlight, and for a moment he simply watched, memorizing the curve of her shoulders, the way her posture suggested both strength and solitude. "High Counselor," he said softly. She turned, and that same flush from the ceremony bloomed across her face. "Please, when we're alone, call me Silith. The formalities feel unnecessary between us." "Silith," he repeated, loving the sound of her name. "Then I'm just Ryan." They began walking the garden paths, ostensibly discussing Thesseran philosophical traditions, but the conversation quickly drifted into more personal territory. Silith asked about Earth, and Ryan found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. How he'd chosen this career because he'd always felt like an outsider on his own world, how traveling between stars felt like searching for a home he'd never had. "I understand that feeling more than you know," Silith said quietly. They'd stopped beside a cluster of flowers that pulsed with gentle blue light. "Leadership is the loneliest position imaginable. Everyone sees the counselor, the symbol, the decision-maker. No one sees me." "I see you," Ryan said, the words escaping before he could consider their weight. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes made his chest ache. "Do you? Sometimes I wonder if I even see myself anymore." They met again 2 nights later, then 3 nights after that. Each meeting was supposed to be professional, each had some official justification, but they both knew the truth. They talked for hours, sharing stories, laughing at the absurdities of diplomatic protocol, finding common ground in the spaces between their vastly different lives. On the 5th evening, they sat on a bench beside the luminous pond. The garden had grown quiet, and the flowers around them glowed brighter, responding to the emotional energy in the air. Silith was telling him about her childhood, a rare glimpse into a past she rarely discussed, when her hand gestured and accidentally brushed against his. The contact was electric. Both of them froze, staring at where their hands had touched. Slowly, Silith withdrew, but Ryan could see her pulse quickening at the base of her throat, could see the way her breathing had changed. "Silith," he whispered. "This is dangerous," she said, but she didn't move away. "You know this is dangerous." "I know. My council already questions these meetings. If they knew what I was feeling," she stopped abruptly, as if she'd revealed too much. "What are you feeling?" Ryan asked, his voice barely audible over the chiming leaves. She met his eyes, and in the triple moonlight, her face was achingly beautiful. Terrified. Exhilarated. Alive in a way I haven't felt in years. And completely, utterly foolish. "That's exactly what I'm feeling." They sat in charged silence, the space between them humming with possibility. Finally, Silith stood, and Ryan's heart sank, thinking she was ending their meeting early. But instead, she extended her hand to him. "Walk with me," she said. "Just a little longer." He took her hand, and this time neither of them let go. They walked deeper into the gardens, to a secluded grove where the trees formed a natural canopy overhead. The bioluminescent flowers here responded dramatically to their presence, blooming in cascades of color, deep purples and warm golds, colors that Kiv had once told him represented passion and connection in Thesseran culture. "The flowers betray us," Silith said with a soft laugh that held both joy and sadness. "They show what we're trying so hard to hide." "Maybe we shouldn't hide it," Ryan suggested, squeezing her hand gently. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "You don't understand what you're asking. I'm not just a person, Ryan. Every choice I make affects millions. Every appearance, every relationship, every moment of my life is scrutinized and judged. If I were to acknowledge these feelings, if I were to act on them, the universe would judge you," Ryan finished. "I know. But Silith, doesn't it matter what you want? Don't you deserve to choose your own happiness?" "Do any of us truly get to choose?" she asked, but her voice wavered with hope rather than resignation. They stood facing each other in the flowering grove, hands still intertwined, the night alive with possibility around them. The longest moon was rising, casting silver light through the canopy, and in that moment, duty and desire warred visibly across Silith's expressive face. "I should send you away," she whispered. This is madness. Then let it be madness, Ryan said, stepping closer. Just for tonight, let's be mad together. Silitha's breath hitched, and the flowers around them exploded into brilliant crimson, the Thessaran color of profound emotion. She looked at the blooms, then back at him, and something in her expression shifted from fear to determination. Tomorrow, we have duties, she said. But tonight. She lifted her free hand to his face, her touch feather-light and trembling. Tonight, let me be just Silith. And let you be just Ryan. He covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. She gasped softly at the gesture, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, they held a depth of longing that matched his own. The garden seemed to hold its breath around them, waiting. The dance of tradition. The festival of alignment came faster than Ryan wanted. For 3 days, he and Silith had continued their secret meetings, each encounter deepening the connection that neither could deny. But they'd been careful, restrained, knowing that crossing certain lines would complicate everything. Still, the tension between them built like a gathering storm, beautiful and inevitable. Now, dressed in formal attire provided by his hosts, Ryan stood among the gathered dignitaries in the ceremonial plaza. Thousands of Thessarans filled the space, their excitement palpable as the 3 moons began their rare alignment overhead. The festival dance was sacred, ancient, performed by the High Counselor as a symbol of harmony between cosmic forces. Silith appeared at the plaza's edge, and the crowd fell silent in reverence. She wore ceremonial robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself, her hair adorned with crystals that caught and refracted the light of the aligning moons. She moved to the center of the plaza with measured steps, her face serene and distant, the perfect leader, untouchable and divine. The music began, a haunting melody produced by Thessaran instruments that seemed to resonate with the very air. Silith began to dance, her movements fluid and precise, telling a story of celestial balance that predated human civilization. Ryan watched, transfixed, as she embodied grace itself. Then, impossibly, she paused. The music continued, but Silith stood still, her eyes scanning the crowd. When they found Ryan, something shifted in her expression, a moment of decision, of surrender to impulse. She extended her hand toward him. A collective gasp rippled through the plaza. "This breaks protocol," her chief advisor hissed from nearby, loud enough for Ryan to hear. "She cannot." But Silitha's hand remained extended, and her eyes held Ryan's with an intensity that made his heart race. He understood what she was offering, what she was risking. This was more than invitation, it was declaration. He walked forward, aware of every eye upon him, aware of the magnitude of this moment. When he reached her, he took her hand, and the contact sent that familiar electricity coursing through him. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "No," she admitted, her lips curving in a smile that held both fear and exhilaration. "But I'm doing it anyway." The music swelled, and they began to move together. Silith guided him through the traditional steps, but something magical happened. Their bodies synchronized naturally, as if they'd danced together for lifetimes. Ryan's hand found its place at her waist, and he felt her sharp intake of breath, felt the way she leaned almost imperceptibly closer. Under the triple moonlight, they danced, and the world fell away. The watching crowd, the political implications, the impossibility of their situation, none of it mattered. There was only the music, the movement, and the way Silitha's eyes held his with such raw emotion that it stole his breath. When the dance required them to move closer, her body pressed against his, and Ryan heard her soft gasp. Her usual composure had melted away entirely, replaced by something vulnerable and achingly human despite her alien nature. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder, and he could feel the rapid beating of her heart. "Ryan," she breathed, his name a prayer on her lips. The final notes of the music hung in the air, and they stood frozen in the ending pose, faces inches apart, breathing each other's breath. The crowd remained absolutely silent, shocked into stillness by what they'd witnessed. Then, slowly, scattered applause began. It grew, spreading through the plaza, though Ryan could hear the murmurs of confusion and concern woven through it. Silith stepped back, her professional mask slipping back into place, though her hands trembled slightly as she bowed to acknowledge the crowd. But as she turned to leave the plaza, she glanced back at him one more time, and the look in her eyes held a promise. Later, After the crowds had dispersed and Ryan had endured countless questions from his own delegation, he returned to his quarters to find a message waiting. Silith's private seal glowed on the holographic display. The observatory. Midnight. Please. Whispered confessions. Ryan arrived at the observatory 10 minutes early, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. The circular chamber sat atop the highest tower of the palace, its transparent dome offering an unobstructed view of Thessera's night sky. Holographic star maps floated throughout the space, casting gentle light that painted everything in shades of blue and silver. Silith stood at the center, her back to the entrance, gazing up at a projection of distant galaxies. She'd changed from her ceremonial robes into something simpler, though no less elegant. Her shoulders were tense, and Ryan could see she'd been crying from the slight shimmer of moisture on her cheeks. Silith. She turned quickly, and the vulnerability in her expression nearly broke him. Ryan. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'll always come when you call, he said simply, crossing the space between them. She laughed, a broken sound. You shouldn't say things like that. You shouldn't make promises we both know are impossible to keep. What do you mean? Silith activated a control, and the holographic projections shifted to display Earth's solar system. I received communication from your superiors this afternoon. Your mission here has been deemed a success. The cultural exchange protocols are established, the initial treaties drafted. They want you home, Ryan. In 3 days, you're supposed to leave the Sara. The words hit him like a physical blow. 3 days. 72 hours. And then he'd never see her again, never hear her laugh, never feel the electricity of her touch. No, he said, though he knew how futile the word was. There must be something, extensions, further negotiations. I already tried, she interrupted, her voice cracking. I invented reasons for you to stay, proposed additional cultural programs, even suggested you should remain as a permanent liaison. My council denied every request. They suspect, Ryan. After the dance, they know something exists between us, and they want you gone before it becomes a scandal that could undermine my authority. Ryan moved closer, unable to bear the distance between them. Then I'll resign. I'll find another reason to come back, or I'll stay on my own. And do what? The Sara has strict immigration laws. You can't just live here without purpose, without position. Silith pressed her hands to her face, and when she spoke again, her voice was muffled. I've spent the last 6 hours trying to find a solution, any solution, and there isn't one. We were foolish, Ryan. We let this happen knowing it could only end in heartbreak. Don't say that, he said fiercely, pulling her hands from her face and holding them in his own. Don't call what we have foolish. These past weeks with you have been the most real, most alive I've ever felt. That's not foolish. That's precious. Tears spilled down her cheeks, tracing paths of light across her silver skin. Then what do we do? How do I let you go? How do I return to my life of duty and responsibility and pretend my heart isn't breaking? Ryan pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his chest. He held her tightly, feeling her tears soak through his shirt, feeling his own eyes burning. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I know it's too soon, I know it's impossible, but I love you, Silith. And I need you to know that before I leave. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide and shimmering with tears. You can't love me. You barely know me. I know that you carry the weight of millions on your shoulders, but still make time to ensure the palace gardener's children have proper education. I know you hate the ceremonial wine, but drink it anyway because tradition matters to your people. I know you hum when you're thinking, that you're afraid of letting anyone see your uncertainty, that you've spent your whole life being what others needed you to be instead of discovering who you truly are. He cupped her face gently. I know you, Silith. And I love you. A sob escaped her, and then she was kissing him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, passionate, filled with all the longing they'd been restraining for weeks. Ryan's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer as her hands tangled in his hair. She tasted like starlight and salt, like every dream he'd never known he had. They broke apart, both breathing heavily, and Silith laughed through her tears. I love you too. I've loved you since that first moment in the crystal hall when our eyes met and my entire carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. I've loved you through every stolen conversation, every forbidden glance, every moment I should have been focusing on my duties but could only think of you. Ryan kissed her again, softer this time, savoring every second. Her hands traced the line of his jaw, his neck, his shoulders, as if memorizing him through touch. When they finally pulled apart, they were both trembling. 3 days, she whispered. We have 3 days. Then let's not waste them, Ryan said. No more hiding, no more pretending. For 3 days, let's just be Ryan and Silith, 2 people who found each other across the stars. She nodded, and he saw determination replacing some of the sorrow in her eyes. Yes. And then. She hesitated, biting her lip. And then I let you go, because I love you too much to cage you here in a world where you'd always be the human who corrupted their High Counselor. And you let me go, because you love me too much to watch me sacrifice everything I've built for a love that society will never accept. Silith. She pressed her fingers to his lips. That's tomorrow's pain. Tonight, just hold me. Dance with me here, where no one can judge, no one can condemn. Help me create memories beautiful enough to sustain me through all the lonely years ahead. So they danced in the observatory, with only the stars as witnesses, swaying to music only they could hear. And when the 3 moons aligned perfectly overhead, bathing them in triple moonlight, they held each other and whispered promises they both knew they couldn't keep. A new dawn. The transport station hummed with activity as Ryan loaded his belongings onto the earthbound vessel. 3 days had passed in a blur of stolen moments. Sunrise walks through the palace gardens, quiet dinners in Silith's private quarters, conversations that lasted until dawn. They'd laughed and cried and held each other, packing a lifetime of intimacy into 72 precious hours. Now it was ending. Ambassador Chen waited by the boarding ramp, diplomatic and discreet as always, though Ryan had seen the sympathy in his eyes. The rest of the delegation had already boarded, leaving Ryan to say his final goodbyes. Silith hadn't come. They'd agreed it would be easier this way, that a public farewell would only make everything more painful. Their real goodbye had happened last night in the observatory, with tears and kisses and whispered words of love that would echo in Ryan's heart forever. Ready? Chen asked gently. Ryan nodded, not trusting his voice. He picked up his final case and turned toward the ramp. Wait. The voice cut through the station's noise like a bell. Ryan spun around, his heart leaping, and saw Silith running toward him through the crowd. She wasn't wearing her ceremonial robes or her jeweled headdress. She was dressed simply, practically, with a travel bag slung over her shoulder. Behind her, several of her council members hurried to keep pace, calling out protests that she ignored completely. Silith. Ryan dropped his case, unable to process what he was seeing. What are you doing? She reached him, breathless and radiant, her eyes blazing with determination. I'm invoking the right of soul-deep knowledge. A shocked murmur rippled through the Thesserans in the crowd. Even Chen looked startled, glancing between them with raised eyebrows. The what? Ryan asked. Silith's chief advisor caught up, gasping. High Counselor, please reconsider. This tradition hasn't been invoked in 3 generations. The implications are clearly outlined in our oldest laws, Silith interrupted firmly, though she kept her eyes on Ryan. When a Thesseran leader believes there exists knowledge vital to their people's future, knowledge that can only be gained through personal journey and experience, they may temporarily step aside from their duties to pursue that knowledge. The right is absolute and cannot be denied. But, the advisor sputtered. I invoke it now, Silith declared, her voice carrying across the station. I believe that understanding the full depth of human Thesseran connection, of the bonds that can exist between our species, is vital to our civilization's future. And I cannot gain that understanding from diplomatic briefings or cultural reports. I must experience it myself. She finally turned from her advisor to face Ryan fully, and he saw both nervousness and hope in her expression. If you'll have me, she said, more quietly now. I know this is sudden, I know it complicates everything, but Ryan, I can't watch you leave. I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what if. I need to know what we could be, what this connection could become, without the weight of my title between us. Ryan's mind reeled. How long? How long do you have? 1 Earth year, she said. According to the old laws, that's the minimum time required to gain genuine understanding. After that, I must return and resume my duties, or formally abdicate. Your people have a detailed succession protocol for exactly this situation. My vice-counselor is more than capable. And Ryan. She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. I've spent my entire life serving others, making every choice based on what was best for the Sara. Just this once, I'm choosing what's best for me. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. If you want that too. Ryan looked into her eyes and saw everything he'd dreamed of but never believed possible. I want that more than anything in the universe. A smile broke across her face like sunrise, and she launched herself into his arms. He caught her, spinning her around as she laughed, a sound of pure joy that he'd never heard from her before. When he set her down, he kissed her, not caring about the crowd watching, not caring about protocols or propriety. When they finally broke apart, Chen was grinning. I suppose we'll need to adjust the passenger manifest. Welcome aboard, High Counselor. Just Silith, she corrected, lacing her fingers through Ryan's. For the next year, I'm just Silith. As they boarded the vessel together, Silith paused at the top of the ramp to look back at the Sara one last time. Her advisor had tears in his eyes, but he bowed deeply, a gesture of respect and blessing. Inside the ship, Ryan led Silith to the observation deck. As the vessel lifted off, they stood together watching the Sara shrink below them, the crystalline cities glittering like jewels against the planet's surface. Are you scared? Ryan asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him, her eyes on the stars ahead. Terrified. I've never been away from the Sara for more than a few weeks. I've never been without my title, my purpose, my identity as a leader. I don't know who I am without all of that. Then we'll discover it together, he promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. We'll explore the galaxy, visit different worlds, meet new civilizations. We'll learn about each other and ourselves. And maybe, along the way, we'll figure out how two people from different worlds can build something that lasts. Silith turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. What if we fail? What if this year proves that what we have can't survive outside of stolen moments and secret meetings? Then at least we'll know, Ryan said. We'll have tried, really tried, instead of spending our lives wondering. But Silith, I don't think we'll fail. What we have, it's not just attraction or infatuation. It's recognition. It's finding someone who sees you completely and loves every part of what they see. She smiled, and in that smile he saw not the composed High Counselor, but simply Silith, curious, hopeful, brave enough to leap into the unknown. Then let's begin, she said. Show me your Earth. Teach me about human poetry and music and art. Take me to places that matter to you. And I'll share my knowledge, my culture, everything I am. Deal, Ryan said, sealing it with a kiss. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, stretching the stars into streams of light around them, they held each other and watched the universe unfold. Neither knew exactly what the future held, whether Silith would return to the Sara or choose to abdicate, whether their relationship would deepen or eventually run its course, whether they'd find a way to bridge their worlds permanently or eventually have to part. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with infinity spread out before them, they had something more precious than certainty. They had possibility, they had each other, and they had chosen love over duty, courage over fear, hope over resignation. The stars had aligned, and two souls from different worlds had found each other in the vast darkness of space. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. The end.